and welcome to Traditional Painting the Digital Way. This is where I use digital painting apps to teach traditional painting techniques. I'm going to be starting a brand new series, and we're going to be painting a red barn in the snow. And this is one of my most popular paintings, and I think people really like it because it has the bright red color against the blue snow, and it looks really pretty and light and cheerful. So the app that I'm going to be using is Infinite Painter for Android. And if you want to follow along with traditional materials, here's a list of all the brushes that I use. And I mainly use canvas board to paint on, but I also like gallery wrapped canvas because it's very easy to frame. You actually don't need a frame, you can just paint on the edges. And here's a list of all the paint that I use, and I use Grumbacher Academy acrylics mostly, and I also use some Liquitex, and the names will vary from brand to brand. And so I found a whole bunch of photo references of barns at pixabay.com where you can get royalty-free photo references. And I went ahead and chose the shapes of the barns that I liked, and the snow scene, and the mountain scene that I like the best. And I want to go ahead and start with a light blue sky. And so I picked the Vincent brush in Infinite Painter, and you can use your flat wash brush if you're following along with your acrylics. And you want to make crisscross X-shaped strokes to make the sky look smooth. And you want a light blue color, and you can get this by using ultramarine blue and burnt sienna and a lot of white acrylic gesso if you're following along with your acrylics. And then I wanted to go ahead and paint in some distant mountains. And you want to go ahead and make sure that the edges are sort of jagged because you want it to look like realistic mountains. And I wanted these to be kind of a bluer look. I started out with a purple look, and then I wanted a bluer look. So you could take your sky mixture that you have and throw in some ultramarine blue if you're following along with acrylics. And you want kind of a bluish look to the mountains in the background. And here I wanted to go ahead and sort of smooth out the edges of the mountains right here because it's easier to cover things in your painting if you blur the edges out. And also, especially if you're doing this traditionally, because the hard edges will dry and then your acrylic paint is opaque. And sometimes it is not as opaque as it should be, and you have to go over it several times to get rid of some of those hard edges. So it's better to smudge those out. And I wanted to go ahead and add some snow on the mountains, and I was using the stucco brush in Infinite Painter, and you can just use your number 6 filbert brush if you want to, and just add jagged lines for the canyons and make sure that you smudge them. You want to keep them soft though, and you want to use kind of a light blue color. You don't want real bright white because these mountains are distant, so the real bright white wouldn't show up. And then here I want to go ahead and add in some clouds at the top, and I took white acrylic gesso with a touch of cadmium orange and then smudged them out into the sky there. And that just kind of makes some distant clouds. You don't want them real big detailed. And then you can take that same mixture and add maybe a touch of blue to it and make the distant snow at the foot of your mountains. And you can use your filbert brush if you're following along traditionally and just smudge that snow out too. And then we want to go ahead and make the snow a little bit darker as we get closer to the middle ground and the foreground. And this is going to be sort of the underpainting for the snow. And it'll just be the first layer, and then you'll add some highlights to it. So I want a grayish color, and if you're following along with your acrylics, mix ultramarine blue and burnt sienna and a lot of white acrylic gesso, and that will give you the grayish look that you want. And you can just use your number 8 bristle brush and throw in some darker patches of blue in this painting, just to make it different colors, because the snow colors will vary and you want to make your painting look interesting. And you can use old oil brush or old gouache if you're following along with Infinite Painter. And then I always use the schoolhouse chalk to blend because it gives it that painterly look there. And then I wanted to use the Pollock brush and Infinite Painter for the distant trees. And you just want to use ultramarine blue and maybe a little bit of some dioxazine purple and some hooker's green and make a grayish color. Add lots of white to it to make a grayish color for your trees. And then on a separate layer, you want to make the barn, and you want to just sketch this in first. And if you're following along traditionally, use charcoal so that you can rub it off. And so what you want to do is make a triangle shape on top of a square shape for the front of the barn. And that part will not be in perspective, but the side of the barn will be in perspective. So you want to find your vanishing point on your horizon line. The lines that make up the top of your barn roof and the bottom of your barn roof are in perspective, and they line up with your vanishing point. The line that makes up the back of your barn roof is not in perspective, and it lines up with the exact angle of the front of your barn roof. So it's parallel to the line that's in the front of your barn, and it's on the beginning triangle that you made. Then when you make the shed roof, the front line of the shed roof will be parallel to the back line of the shed roof, but they won't be in perspective. The bottom line on the shed roof, that's the edge of the roof right before it reaches the wall of the barn, that one will be in perspective, and so it will actually line up with the vanishing point on your horizon line, just like the top of the barn roof. And then the edges of the barn, they'll be straight up and down and parallel to each other, so they won't be in perspective either. And that is your 1-point perspective, which is kind of complicated to explain in words, but it's simple enough if you can just kind of watch and see how it's done. It's easier to explain with pictures, I think, than it is actually words. And so anyway, there's your barn, and then you want to go ahead and start painting it. And I wanted to use kind of a streaky looking paint to just give it an old weathered wood look. So I was using some of the old oil brushes and some of the rake brushes that are in Infinite Painter, and all these should be available to the public now, I think. All these new brushes have been added to the public version. And I'm using sort of a dark red color for the underpainting, and you can use alizarin crimson if you're following along traditionally. We just want to start out with a dark red there and make the first layer of paint. And just keep an up and down stroke because we want it to kind of look like old boards and weathered wood that's on the barn there. And then you want to go ahead and do the roof with a dark underpainting as well, and you can make it sort of the same color that you did the snow on the ground. And if you're following along traditionally, just mix ultramarine blue, burnt sienna, and white acrylic gesso. Maybe throw in a touch of dioxazine purple. You just want kind of a darker snow color as well. And try to kind of keep the edges of your roof, the parallel edges, straight. And then I wanted to go ahead and add the dark blue right there to show the separation of the shed roof and the barn roof. And it doesn't have to be real straight because that's going to be snow and icicles hanging off there, so it kind of just gives the indication of some snow and ice that might have melted and is sticking to the top and the bottom of those different shed roofs. And you can add that darker blue underneath the shed roof on the bottom there just to give it some shadow. And then I wanted to highlight the boards on the barn a little, so I'm using a lighter red. And if you're following along with your acrylics, use cadmium red light. And add some white acrylic gesso, and then add some pure red there just to kind of give it a board look there. And don't cover up all your dark because you want it to look like it's weathered wood. And then here I'm using a dark mixture. You can throw in some blue with your red, and that'll give you almost a black mixture to make your windows and your doors. And I'll go back and straighten those up in the next video. So this is the end of my winter barn series, and in part 2 we're going to go ahead and continue to add more details to the barn and work on the highlights to the snow and just add more details to the picture. So if you're interested in seeing that, subscribe. And thanks everybody for watching. Thank you so much for your support. If you have any questions, just leave them in the comments down below. And I will catch you later.